Hello, everyone. We are the RPGeeks, and this is the DnDebrief.
Yay!
It's one of our many shows with very cool names. We were very proud of the pun, DnDebrief.
And we started from the pun and worked.
Yeah,
backwards.
we started there. And we are sort of debriefing on our last D&D session, which we had last week, but with a sciencey flavor. In that we're talking about some science topics that came up on our actual play show. So let's introduce ourselves first off. Hi there, my name is Shamini. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a science video journalist. Simon.
Hello, I'm Simon. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a wannabe science journalist, but I mostly just get stuck making videos on YouTube and streaming on Twitch like I'm doing right now. Emily?
I'm Emily. I am a science video journalist and I play D&D a lot. Ali?
I guess I'm more on the audio side of things at the moment, of the science journalism, that whole thing. So, yeah, stick that up your microphone and smoke it. I don't know.
Excellent.
I really hope this is how you introduce yourself at every event. Like, that's, and welcome to the stage.
Yeah,
Dr.
with
Ali
that
Jennings.
level of, like, the actual sound of me turning away, was that actually, I'm walking away.
So, as I said, we have our D&D actual play adventures, which are on alternate Wednesdays. And Emily Bates, you were asking beforehand whether we should sum up. I feel like there are only a couple of things that have happened that's actually relevant.
Yeah.
To what we're going to talk about today. So one of the things was actually from the episode before last, just to confuse things. It's my fault. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Which was our adventurers went to stake out a location where crime was going to be happening.
Find the crime and fight the crime.
Find the crime. And they ended up just sitting there and waiting for a long period in the cold. So in a little bit, I'm going to be talking about sitting around in the cold and how that's great.
Disclaimer, do not sit around in the cold. We're not,
the answer is don't
without
do it.
adequate preparation.
We're not 19th century physicians being like, go and take in the sea air. It's very bracing.
Oh, sea air is lovely though. I feel
You know what? I'm gonna come out. I'm coming out hard on this one. There are times when you want to be out in the cold. Don't, Simon.
When it's hot.
Yeah, when it's hot, for example, I'm totally with you.
Medical times.
Ooh,
I'm ready for this.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to it.
in the second half of the D&D.
The second half of the D-debrief. But the other thing that happened last session, which we were all so excited about,
Finally happened.
finally, after, what was it, 8 sessions? Well, no,
6.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We finally got to level up our characters.
Level up.
From level 1.
Level 2, baby!
Yeah.
It was such a wrench. Like, I loved you at that so squishy level.
I know you did.
And
It feels so good.
It's going from preschool to reception. Just like, off you go. You're still pretty much useless, but let's just take you up a little bit.
So does
you can
anyone
look down on your level 1 selves.
want to, for people who are joining us for the science and don't have a clue what all these Dungeons and Dragons things are, does anyone want to explain leveling up?
Sounds like a DM job for me.
That does sound like a DM job.
I was
Off you go,
wondering. I didn't
DM.
want to put you on the spot, Ali.
Ooh. Okay, so my understanding, right, and everybody's going to have their own read of this, but is that in 5e at least, you have 20 possible levels, right, over the whole course of human, well, not just human, of any race's sort of power goes from 1 to 20. And when you get to level 20, you're essentially a god. And when you're at level 1, you're just a little bit more sort of powerful than your average splurge wandering around on the street, right? So
Splurge wandering
leveling
around.
What a choice of words.
Street.
Accurate, yeah.
It's just funny.
Occasionally, I get hypnotized by my own background. Like, I sort of see myself. I'm like checking to see that I look all right, and the bricks like draw me in, and I just So,
They look lovely.
I'm trying here,
Look great.
right? But
Ali,
it's
Ali just cast Hypnotic Pattern on himself.
yeah, on
Good
myself
D&D
as a
reference,
permanent.
Simon. I'm so
That
proud of
was-
you. Simon's learning D&D spells.
I'm the noob of the group, in case people can't tell from our normal episodes.
Bloop, bloop. Anyway, so as you for each of those different levels, you get sort of increasing powers. The game gives you either higher level spells or more attacks, or generally just sort of raises your stat levels. So in order to go up a level, you have to accrue experience. That's the game mechanic that does it. And to accrue experience, you can kill baddies, or you can achieve sort of notable things. So you can have sort of story-based quests which you succeed in, and that will grant you this sort of leveling up ability. So the point, well, one of the things about Dungeons & Dragons is that you want to go through succeeding and then getting rewarded by leveling up and getting more powers, so you can go and fight bigger things and have bigger adventures and then get rewarded from that, and on and on and on and on. And each different subclass has different kinds of leveling up their sort of leveling up tree. Does that just about cover it? I don't know.
Get more HP too.
But it's quantized. It's quantizing experience in life, basically.
It is. You know what? That's really interesting, because there is... I'm sorry, Bates.
No, you
there's-
go. This is great.
Like, there's qualitative and quantitative data, right? Qualitative data, it's when it's like 1, 2, 3, well, no, that's a bad example. It's like apple, another apple, another apple, another apple. These are things which are indivisible, although apples could be divided. Bad example.
Oh my god.
So
Ali.
there's almost nothing which is qualitative data if you really drill into it. But quantitative data is when you can
About
subdivide.
happiness, Simon. I mean, Ali.
No, sorry, I've sorry, what?
Happiness.
No,
My
because you can be
happiness.
different. You can measure happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, and suddenly it's
Cannot.
quantitative
Oh.
data.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that's then inherently
cannot-
subjective. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not an objective quantitative
Quantify
scale.
my
Sure,
happiness.
I mean, objectivity and subjectivity are, that's irrelevant to this qualitative divide. Like,
No, what you're saying
Anyway,
is you can quantize almost anything. Not that it
I
is
think that's-
quantitative.
that's a way of
That is
thinking of
better.
it.
that's a
Yeah.
really good way of looking at it. Yeah, maybe a quantum, like a quark. That's a quantitative. That's qualitatively different from another quark. You can't have like 2 bits of quarks, right?
Well, yeah, they're fundamental would be the sort of the way to put it.
Point being,
I feel like I've strayed here.
you
Anyway,
need-
point being,
we're
needs
tan-
numbers, so everything has to be.
Simon raises a really good point, which is that as you go up the levels, it's a qualitative shift each time, whereas in reality, you would assume it would be a quantitative, like slow easing up the sort of power levels rather than a step change
Yes.
as you go
I
on.
see.
It's
Yes.
continuous rather than discrete.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to say.
But also, it implies that it's monotonic. Like, you only ever get better in D&D. There's no scope for getting worse.
That's true.
Also,
You've got to have
Warlock and your god says
awful.
no.
has anyone ever done a like Tenet-style D&D thing where you start at level 20 and then, I don't know, it's like combat, and each round you go down by a level
Like-
as you degrade?
Isn't that Benjamin Button?
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you
I
were, or if
expect
you
you
were,
could work that into something
if you were
as
a
like
cleric
a challenge.
and you were kind of going evil as you got further away from like the purpose of your god, maybe they'd give you less and less power.
But presumably, if you were a DM and you were doing that, you'd be on level 20, but you'd only pit them against really crap shit baddies like goblins and stuff. You'd be
No,
like,
put
you
them
obliterate them. you
against a
move on.
dragon and say if you don't do all the damage in the first round, you're going to be fucked.
Farsight does make a very good point in Twitch chat, saying that the deck of many things can lose you levels. So there is a mechanic, but it's not exactly. It's not like common. It's not built into the game to degrade over time.
Can I jump in very briefly? Just this might not be a problem, but Ali, your new microphone is beautiful.
Yes, you're very
It is
close to it.
plosive city. Every time you say
okay.
a P,
Take me down to the plosive city.
I do
no,
say a lot of
nothing.
Ps.
So
How
I'm
about
when the
this?
pop
Is this
shield is
better?
doing its work. Say Peter Piper and all that about his
Oh,
peppers.
proprietary.
Still a little bit.
Still puppy.
proprietary pieces of.
Yeah, Priapic is just to do with a big dick, right?
That's better. What?
Well,
Priapus.
Priapus was the Roman god that had an enormous
Pudding.
member, right?
We
I don't
are.
know.
Is it
Never heard
God?
of Priapus.
We are
That's great.
straying more
Sorry,
than
right.
normally
We're straying
That
from
is
God's
better.
light is
well
what we're
done,
doing.
well done, Ali. Thank you. Sorry, I
That's
just wanted
better.
to before
Okay.
we get too far in, so that our podcast listeners.
Am
aren't
I even audible
pain.
at this range?
You're quieter.
Okay. Should I turn myself up? I'll turn myself
Yeah, well, is it chucking it down with rain where you are today?
up. It might do at any juncture. I live essentially in a
That's
rainforest
the weather.
up a hill in England.
Well, you said you can get temperate rainforests.
Temperate rainforests. I was hearing about this.
Yeah, like Washington
can.
State.
To
I was
read-
in one.
Are you?
Yeah, they have them in New Zealand, right? They have this. It's beautiful, right? It's unlike like a rainforest. Sorry, Twitch. But like they have a rainforest where it's all the trees that you sort of think about and remember from sort of the UK. But instead of there being lots of kind of like birds and monkeys and stuff, it's more like everything is covered in moss. It's moss and just greenery. Everything is green and like a really violent like lime green in your face. It's unbelievable. And cold, but beautiful.
So leveling up in D&D.
Oh, okay, we're doing it now. Okay. Oh wow, there's just been some beautiful straying today, and I've enjoyed it a lot because it means I didn't have to talk.
But you've been researching
I
hard.
have.
You've been looking everything up and understanding the science behind leveling up in D&D.
So how do
I
you
believe
how
we've
do you
only got
explain
5 minutes?
how do you explain the science of leveling up? What is your explanation?
Justify it.
So something that came up when we were talking about leveling up last time, someone mentioned the 10,000 hours to become an expert in chat.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk a little bit on that because there's some interesting stuff. So it became popular because a guy called Malcolm Gladwell put out a book called Outliers, and it was all based on previous research that studied people who were like the absolute top of their field. So like really good violinists. They looked at the Beatles. They looked at athletes and things like that, and they found that the thing they had in common was they'd all put in 10,000 hours or more dedicated practice. And they went, great, okay, clearly if you do 10,000 hours, that's how you become the best at something. And then this kind of, over the years, has kind of been diluted, the message a bit. And I think it kind of turned into this thing of, if you want to be good at something, you need to put in 10,000 hours. Now, there are...
Is that not what you just said they said? You become the expert if you do 10,000 hours. Great. Sounds great.
But what you have to remember is these are the people who are at the absolute top of their fields. So they're doing it as a job. So they are automatically putting in a lot of hours just by doing their thing, right?
Okay.
And now I looked it up, there are 8,760 hours in a year. So even if you practiced all day, every day, and didn't sleep for a year, you're not going to become an expert in something. And there are a lot of things, and since then, a lot of people have like looked into this 10,000 hour thing. Now, practice is absolutely a very important part. If you want to be good at something, you should probably practice. I'm not giving anyone excuses to not do their piano scales. Sorry. But it's not the be all and end all. So, for example, it basically works out as like percentages. So the majority, in another study, the majority of the best violinists had accumulated less practice than the average amount of the good violinists. So to get to like the top level, you kind of, it seems like you have an innate
Oh
good
no.
thing. And there's been twin studies and things done like which all kind of point to this. Some people are just going to be better at certain
So basically,
things.
like if you're not just automatically good at something, you probably shouldn't really bother trying.
Never try. Yeah, just don't do it. That's the message I would like to put out there to everyone. No, I want it to be different. No, I've got a positive message.
Oh,
around
okay.
The idea is like the 10,000 hour people were the best in the world. And I would quite like to be the best in the world at something, but I don't expect to be. And actually, I'd be quite happy being pretty good at things. I mean, you guys played Mario Kart with me at the weekend. I would like to be better at Mario Kart.
I was going to say, if you were about to say you were pretty good at Mario Kart, I would...
I will throw the controller at you from here. Like
I was amazing at Mario Kart.
Shamini played Mario
I
Kart
have
for the first
innate
time and was
talent.
really, really good.
Yeah, that is true. You did have an innate talent for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also had all the assists on.
Yep.
We're not gonna.
Wait, so you're saying you don't need to be level 20 at the things you do, but you want to be at least level 3 because level 1 sucks.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
That's kind of what you've been saying.
I just think the 10,000 hour rule, it kind of perpetuates this like idea that we can all be great at anything that we put our minds to, which can actually be like quite detrimental to people's sanity, including my own. Like when I was younger, I wanted to be the best at everything I did, and if I wasn't, I would like not be really like mad at myself. And classic high achiever turning into anxious adult kind of Simon,
but based on, I find that interesting that that's based on like working hard, because I found that after there was a certain point, I think a lot of people have the experience where you're quite good at things and you don't have to try, and then you hit the point where you have to try and you're like,
what the fuck is this?
This is not what I signed up for. Like, no,
that's a good but then that kind of also plays into it, right? You would just, I mean, I think I was the same. Like up until a certain age, I didn't have to do any work and it was all fine. But again, that kind of, when you get bad at something, then you think you need to work really hard, and it kind of perpetuates the myth that people sort of rise up through society based on, I'm confusing what I'm saying in my head, but like, do you know what I mean? Like
it's based on how much money your parents have. That's literally the primary indicator of success.
Not about skill. It's not about work.
So
none of us should try.
The money gets you to the point where you can apply the effort in an intelligent, consistent way. If you don't have that, then you don't have that booster. It's parents' money is the solid rocket boosters of like success, of rocketry success.
Yeah, blind fish ideas in Twitch chat. Does 10,000 hour rule also lead into some forms of ageism, as a younger practitioner cannot possibly achieve 10,000 hours until older? Justification, older equals better. And like, you get kids who come in and beat chess grandmasters.
Yeah.
And I don't have any data on like how many hours they've put in. It's probably a lot, but I bet they haven't done 10,000, whereas that chess grandmaster almost definitely has played 10,000 games of chess.
Also, if the last few years have taught us anything, it's that a couple of hours of Googling can turn you into an expert in literally anything.
Like,
epidemiology.
The 10,000 hour expert rule, or, just a couple of hours of Googling, say 2 hours ago, you might have just started reading some articles. Who knows?
But also, like, could we fix a lot of the anti-vax problem if we just said to people, look, you can really understand this if you spend 10,000 hours Googling and then they disappear for a bit. But then, like, how many years later, you're like, oh, this problem's come back to roost. Like,
because then they actually understand it. But then if they actually understood it, you'd hope they'd...
Well, no, but that implies you can get a proper education from Googling, which isn't. It's a bunch of facts.
It leads to the question of, like,
Skillshare.
Are we educating people?
Yeah, thanks to this week's sponsor.
In Googling, as in, are we teaching people facts, or are we teaching people to be able to learn? Whether that's teaching like online skills about how to find information, or
but that's
and
also
all this. Sorry, go on.
That's also the case though with leveling up in D&D, right? Because it's like individual experiences that just add up to give you experience. It's not like a big arc of I'm slowly going to learn how to get better at this thing. It's I do this thing X number of times and that equates to
automatically
better.
Yeah,
right. But so I was thinking about this, so because you would expect like a curve, right? But at some point you couldn't ride a bike, and then there was a flip and you could. There was a time when like you probably got better. But at some point you have to say you couldn't ride a bike, and at some point you had to have been on the side of could ride a bike.
Yeah.
So,
but that.
Go on.
Well, I was going to say, like, that kind of touches on. Enough.
Ali and his microphones.
Don't take the roof off my house.
It's suddenly incredibly dark in here, and this microphone is black. So I don't know.
Oh, I'm waiting.
So yeah, because what we're kind of circling around is the quality of your 10,000 hours. Like 10,000 hours practice doing what, right?
But we're not saying you have to do 10,000 hours. And also 10,000 hours would be to get to like level 20, right? And to become a god. So we've just jumped up to level 2. So we've done a little tiny jump. And so maybe we've done, and I don't know if it's, I don't think it, and that's the other thing. Because I think it's not an straight line on the 10,000 hours. Like you don't do 1 hour and get this good and then you get a little bit that same amount better, you know, because I think they say
leveling up,
the first 20 hours of learning a new skill, you get infinitely better. Like you suddenly, and then after that, it levels out and it's actually like a lot harder to get like actually better at things, which would make sense with the leveling up in D&D because you need more XP to get from level, say, 5 to 6 than you did to get from level 1 to 2. So that fits with an actual graph.
But is there another problem though, that you get better at well, obviously you choose, but you get broadly better
Yeah.
from doing specific. You could just
This
talk
is a
to
problem.
people, and then you could get stronger from that in D&D.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have to rely on. So, like, Infinity is an open book, right? I was thinking about this because I was like, oh, I can just explain how each of us would have like got our skills, and then I realized I can't explain how either of you two got your skills because Sharmani's being sneaky and not telling anyone anything, and Simon has yet to explain how he's going to use his key. So, key not for a door, monk key, like spiritual key.
Right now, Uriel's just let me in. Let me in.
Oh, I finally got my key.
But I think it's I like the idea of using that to explain. So the things that can happen when you're leveling up, you could get a new spell. I know,
Yes.
and I can use this new spell. Or let's say it's a weird feature like key, which might need some more explanation.
Well.
But it's like a thing that you've learned. I feel that fits in with what you were just saying.
Exactly. So funny you should say it. So like with wizards, right?
Yeah.
They're a really nice one for leveling up because if they
Yeah.
gain access to more spells, wizards read their books to like learn a new spell.
Yeah.
So that's great. That
The
like
most
that makes
obvious one,
sense.
right?
They go, oh, I shall learn this new spell, and in the morning, I know the spell now. I love that. That's
Warlocks
nice
and
and
clerics, you could be like, I
I
am
mean,
your patron.
we
Here
don't
is
really
a
have any patrons
spell.
with our campaign, so we
No,
don't
not
quite know
many
how we're
orcs, but
working
that,
them in
you
the
know,
world. But
there are
exactly.
some things that do make sense within D&D lore as to why you're gaining new skills.
And then you get sorcerers who don't even explain how their magic works, and so it's very hard to
Weird.
decide.
Weirdos.
Sometimes they don't even say they're magical. They say they're a fighter or something.
Right, and that's a very our home
Damn
game
it, our
reference
home
there.
game, that must be. Damn it.
But I was thinking about like fighting classes, right? So fighters, that kind of makes sense because you think they've been exercising, they've been fighting, and then they go to sleep, and the next day they find out. So at level 2, they get action surge, so they can hit one extra time in a round, and that makes sense because if you practice for long enough, you eventually get strong enough and quick enough that you can swing your sword an extra time in that 6 seconds. And I think that makes sense to me. And that, so physical classes, nice and neat. Well done, physical classes, nice and easy to explain.
We have to pretend that they've been like practicing in their downtime and they've been getting it up from like 1 and a bit to 1 and a half, but like not good enough to use in combat, and then like now I can do it.
That scene
Or
in
even
Fellowship
like
of the
you
Ring.
think about combat. Sorry, go on.
That scene in Fellowship of the Ring where Boromir is training Merry and Pippin. Like that's him.
Yeah, it's a lot of strong
They're getting the
montage work.
XP up in
Level
that
up
scene.
the halflings.
A lot of montage work, a lot of great songs playing in the background.
Yeah.
Like attack.
But
I was
also,
looking into what the
no, Ali, sorry, I've talked. You talk.
I was looking into the very briefly what sort of brain rearrangement you can get if you're an expert versus a non-expert. Am I going to steal your thunder by it?
No.
When you mean like someone punches your head in because you're an expert and people don't like experts.
Yeah. That's,
Do you
It's
guys
called
know about
depression.
chess boxing, right? You
Yes!
all know about chess boxing. Good.
No.
wait, what's chess boxing?
You don't know about chess boxing? It's
You
the
take
best
someone's
sport.
piece, you get to punch them in the face.
Is that what it is?
It's the ultimate sport. It's I don't know which one goes first, but I think
White normally goes first.
A minute of chess, and then a round of boxing, and then a minute of chess, and then a round of boxing. And obviously, you know,
Boxing quite bad for your brain. Like it doesn't. Can't boxing cause actual brain damage?
that's why it's the ultimate sport.
No.
Because you can win via knockout or
Don't-
via checkmate.
Checkmate.
So you could
You could just be
you could front load all the chess stuff. But go in as like, you know, I was going to say Gary Barlow.
I think
Gary
if you're
Kasparov.
front loading, you front load the boxing.
Or yeah, you go in like Mike Tyson. You're like, I don't care how good you are at chess.
Because I feel like anyone can probably, with a basic understanding of chess, can survive 1 minute of chess. Like if they take all of their time on the turn, right? They
Yeah.
can survive 1 minute. But if you put like a little nerdy chess geek in a ring with Mike Tyson, they're going down immediately.
Very dangerous.
And then the boxer wins. So I think you front load the boxing.
It's 10 tons of physical damage that they could be receiving, right?
But think how much boxing training does it take to be able to survive a round of boxing?
Well, it depends who you're
Right?
fighting.
Maybe not that
Yeah.
much. If you just defense
I'm sorry,
up.
if you train me for like 10 hours on good boxing technique to defend blows, and then you put me in with like Hathor Julius Bjornsson, the mountain from Game of Thrones, like I would be dead.
He would stomp on you.
With some training, Simon, we can do this.
I've lived for this. I've trained for this moment. As my head gets caved in one punch.
Okay, here's a question. If we did RPGeeks chess boxing, who would win?
I don't want to do boxing. No boxing.
Stop distracting from the research,
I
Emily.
want to know the answer to this question, though. Who do people think would win? And
I'm
how?
not very good at chess, and I've never boxed.
I'm really bad at chess. And I'm
Okay.
really bad at
we
boxing.
can't.
I've been punched once. I've been punched in the face once, right? And I was actually in a fight with a friend. I was like, we're gonna have a fight, and it's fine. And he was like, can we punch each other in the face? I was like, yeah, we can punch each other in the face. It's a fight. So we had this fight. He punched me in the face, and I fell over in the fetal position. That was the first thing I did. And then the fight was over. Like,
It sounds like an 18th century gentleman's duel. Like, you were very civil about, like, no crotch shots, punches in the face are allowed. Jolly good. We'll do this in New Jersey. Everything's legal there.
And I really thought, like, after the rules were down, I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm 100% ready for this. Yeah, comes at you fast.
Right. Brain rearranging.
Okay. Yes,
with experience.
Yeah, what is that thing?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is why it's relevant. So apparently, when you become an expert in stuff, they were a bit confused because it looked like the amount of activity in the parts of the brain which are sort of associated with what you're trying to do goes down. And they were like, oh, it must be because everything's becoming more efficient or something. But what happens is actually a lot of it gets like sent out to different parts of the brain and in a much sort of broader network. So if you're a beginner, it's all localized in some bits. And then if you're an expert, it sort of gets spread across the whole brain. And I'm thinking that with the D&D, because it's a sort of experience thing, right? It's about learning about your environment, about all the different cues, about what kind of things, the possibilities, all that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking with D&D, sure, you're a fighter, you go through a really intense, thinky, social sort of quest, and you suddenly level up at the end of it. That's utilizing different parts of the brain to link into what is your initial fighting style. Like maybe at the end of it, you're not thinking, you haven't learned how to swing your sword hard, but maybe you have learned that, people often have a little gap in their armor, right here, because that's a sort of social mark of like success. And then,
That's a bad.
Yeah, I like that.
This culture with the little armor hole was a mark of success.
Little armor hole right here.
Yeah,
Yes.
status symbol in this community. No.
For podcast listeners, we're pointing to the middle of our chests.
Yeah. Six bits.
It's weird.
The armor boob window, the classic.
The
No wonder this society fails with.
I mean,
is, yeah.
if I wear a shirt, you would have it would be. Oh my god. Okay.
Shirts with buttons are the worst. Anyway,
Sorry. I can't believe I just talked about that. Okay.
Stay on topic. This is what happens when we get to the end.
We're going down the Death Star trench run right now, and Emily's just veering off left, right, and centre. Somebody's at the back going, stay on target. Talk about experience. Stay on target.
Oh, I wanted
The tangent came
bring
from
it back.
behind.
Bring it back.
You got this.
So
You got it.
So Infinity is a robot, right? So my leveling up is actually quite easy because it's just either, and also she was damaged before, so it's her kind of like defragging or if not that that's happened this time, re-downloading like old programs and things like that. So my leveling up is really easy, and I built the character purposefully for that.
I have a question about a robot leveling up, because when I install updates on my computer, it's just the software. So is there a way that Infinity could get physically?
Could you download more RAM?
Or better?
So Infinity, I feel like it's not. No, I don't think it's. I'm not going to call this a spoiler.
Like
Ali, you can shout really quickly if you think it's a spoiler.
Like
Infinity
hitting harder
was a higher level.
Spoiler! Wait, what?
Don't do that.
I couldn't take the risk.
Infinity had the ability to arrive on Braxigantu and terraform
the entire planet. Yeah.
You're the Iron
You don't know if
Giant.
it was the entire planet. She arrived on Braxigantu to terraform it, right?
Yeah. She was very high level.
Current
robot.
Infinity
She's now a
could
little bit
not
broke.
terraform a planet other than growing one daisy, like every so often.
You're the Iron Giant. You've crashed on the planet, and then like little Hogarth has to teach you how to be a person again. Infinity going into the sky, going Superman.
Infinite. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Infinity hardware is already in place for leveling up, but it's
Right.
the program style.
Nice.
Oh,
Nice.
or you're a
Yeah.
Tesla. You're getting software updates that unlock, like, because you know how like they're all the same hardware, but you have to pay extra to get the bit of software that allows you to go faster or further or whatever.
Yes. Okay. And there's one more thing I want to talk about because I feel like I should wrap up pretty quickly. You level up in D&D after you take a long rest, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And this kind of makes sense because when we go to sleep, I've read about a new theory and it's really cool. Now, there's this new theory that dreams, hang on, I'm going to explain this really badly. It's okay. So if you think of deep learning, right? Machine learning, deep learning, they take in loads of inputs and they create a algorithm that will respond to new inputs based on the training data that it was trained with. And there's a theory that there's a thing it's called the hang on, I'm missing it, please.
Are you
Pause,
about to
everyone.
say that neurons change the strength of their connections as we sleep, like the weights and biases in the machine learning model do?
Slightly, yes, but in a specific way. So it gets a bit complicated, so bear with me while I try and get my own brain around it. And oh my god, my brain
This
is
is very
shutting down
meta.
again.
Don't think
This happens
about it.
every time
Don't
I
think
try and
about
do
it.
brain
It's the
stuff.
neurons.
My brain goes, don't
I
talk about
think I've
brains.
heard the same. I think I've heard the same thing. Can I?
So
can I
basically,
say what I think
it's a
it
thing
is?
called.
No.
Sorry, go on. It's called.
No,
sorry.
no,
Let Emily speak.
There's a good reason to think that the brain faces a kind of challenge in that. So there's a problem with there's a problem with deep learning in that if you train it on too specific a data, if you give it something too different, it won't make any sense of it and it can't understand. And there is a theory that animals also have this problem. It's called overfitting, where everything fits in too neatly. Because really, our lives are fairly structured, like in a normal sort of response, in a normal day-to-day. And something completely wild and different could potentially send us like haywire if we had no way of like recognizing that. And there's this theory called the overfitted brain hypothesis. And the reason that we don't do that is because of our dreams. So when we go to sleep, you have dreams and they're all like weird data. So they're putting in like really your brain is giving you really weird data that's still kind of related in order to like reinforce the training data that you're giving it in your day to day. So your brain is creating its own like crazy new data points so that if something weird does happen, it can understand it.
That's sick.
Outliers.
It's really cool. And I'm sorry it took me so long to explain it, but it's super cool.
So
And
dreams are your brain's
nice
attempt to
theory.
avoid overfitting.
Yeah, and there was a really good, so basically dreams they called them noise injections that serve the purpose of not enforcing what is learned when awake, but rather counteracting the overfitting associated with that learning.
I like that.
So basically going, hey, everything seems to be set in this one little bit. What if it wasn't? And it was actually, you were flying.
So when we talked before about the Tetris effect of people like seeing and dreaming in code or dreaming in Tetris after they've done a lot of that thing. But every time we talked about that, there's something different about, like when you're coding, for example, it's like you were seeing the code flying towards you, or it was in like a different syntax, or in Tetris, it was like seeing it in the sky. Is that a similar thing then? Is the brain rebelling and saying, you've done a lot of this thing, so why don't we vary it and we'll play Tetris on the sky instead of on a screen?
Just in case in your life suddenly the blocks start falling from the sky,
Yeah.
your brain is ready. I'm prepared for this.
That's kind of what it is. And obviously you can't, so I think it's called domain randomization in AI, when you give like really weird data into a thing to try and like help it like be able to make sense of more stuff. But you can't do that when you're awake, because if your brain started being like, actually that tree's a dragon and it's going to attack you, then that's not good for you. That's very bad perception from your brain's point of view. So, but that it's like, oh, but it's okay because we go to sleep for 8 hours and then we can like start reinforcing and give some weird data to like be able to handle anything.
Because you hear stories of like expert, like geniuses in a field having visions in their dreams, Like Ramunajan did this
Like
with maths.
inspiration.
And is that like you're taking the logic that you've learned during the day of maths or physics or whatever it is, and then you're randomizing it a bit. But if you randomize it in a particular way that perhaps your brain is predisposed towards, then it like still makes sense within the logical constraints that you've learned, but it's just new.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense actually. And I hadn't really thought about it in like those kind of like revelation dreams that people have. But that does kind of make sense.
Thinking outside the box in your day-to-day life is usually unhelpful. Like thinking of random wacky things, it's not useful. But if every so often your brain has a go at it like sometimes could come up with something.
And I remember my granny used to say, like, if you had a question and you didn't know the answer to it, you know you can remember it, you just need to remember it, write it down before you go to bed, and you'll wake up and you'll probably have thought of the answer. I wonder if that's a related thing.
I mean, this is a real like new theory, and it's not being tested. There's no papers on it really. It's Eric Coel. I don't know how you say his last name. Koel. If anyone wants to look into it, it's the overfitted brain hypothesis, and it's fascinating. Yeah, like, and I've just found one of the notes I wrote that I thought makes sense. Self-generated corrupted inputs. I just thought that was
that's amazing.
That was really cool. Oh, and one of the examples was dreaming of flying may help you keep your balance while running. And I don't kind of, and I was like, and that makes, but I mean, there's been a long time of like a lot of research into like going to bed after you learn something to like reinforce the neurons and the pathways and things. But no one ever was really sure why, and we still have no idea really what's happening in the brain while we dream. But I really like the idea that actually it's your brain being like, I'm going to make it all a little bit weird, and then everything will be better when we wake up.
That's great.
Yeah. And then maybe if you do that, you could know a new skill when you wake up. And that brings me to my question that I want everyone to answer. If you could learn one new skill when you wake up tomorrow and you just know it, what would you want it to be?
So not like being really good at something that you already do, but you wish you were better, but like,
well, you could
randomly new that you could suddenly do that you can't now.
Yeah, I'd rather that.
How good do I get to be at this thing?
You get to be good. Like you can confidently do it. You don't get to be like, I'm not going to give you like, you can be the best in the world at poker immediately and you can win all the poker tournaments and become a millionaire.
I was going to say bank
like
robbery.
Really good.
Piano, Ali.
Yeah, I think I go for piano as well, actually.
I think I would go for piano too.
What?
I've always wanted to be able to play piano.
Is no one going to say the sex? Is no one going to say that?
No.
What, good at something that you don't currently do? Or
I was thinking cooking, maybe.
Ooh.
I'm not sure I like the thing is that being good at something doesn't mean you enjoy it more. So you might not want to do it. Like, I'm not that into cooking.
You want it to be something, right, that you... Oh, no, I know what
you're playing concerts as playing the piano and be like, fuck, I hate this.
Like this, stop.
I want to be good at pottery. That would be mine. I've changed my mind.
Oh, this explains the pottery throwdown comment over the weekend. Yes.
Okay. I love pottery throwdown. Everyone should watch it.
You said pottering.
Pottery.
Like just sort of mooching.
I just like to be really good at pottering around. No, I'm good
dancing,
at that already.
Maybe. Quite a lot to be good. But
nice.
Nice. But I don't do it very often. I'm trying to think of something that would be actually useful, and none of these things would make a difference in my life, which is why I was thinking of cooking. Like,
I'd be good at speaking Spanish, so I can actually chat with my fiance in public about other people and have them not understand what I'm talking about.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's
language.
Risk. Spanish very widely spoken.
I was going to say, yeah.
Not in this country. It's not. English is synonymous with monolingual. Like, if you speak any other language in England, you're pretty much okay for most people around you.
So, okay, cool. Good answers, everyone. Everyone, write in the comments on YouTube or on the podcast or on Twitch chat.
If you're listening to the podcast, write us a letter.
If you're listening to the podcast, write us a review. 5 stars.
That'd be nice.
And I'd be really happy. That would be lovely.
I mean,
so basically, leveling up in D&D is hard to explain with science, but
that was pretty good.
I kind of makes sense.
I think that was a pretty good job.
It, yeah.
Great, I'll take it.
Given that my initial thought was like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. Just probably just a bit wrong, really.
Probably just gonna have to gloss over that one. That's probably gonna have to be the one bit of our show that we go, no science there. Don't worry about it. People.
Yeah. Well, some of that is related to my cold, where I've just gone like, does that make sense? Not really. D&D. But yeah.
At some point, we should probably do a really in-depth, like maybe even a special on HP. Because I feel like there's a lot around like what HP actually is. Because it's not like hard. If you're at half health, you haven't had half of your like body destroyed. Like it's not that. Because otherwise games would be over if anyone ever like really went down to zero.
And
So
we could talk about all the different systems that aren't D&D that have different ways of dealing with that kind of thing, which always
We
is
could.
interesting, you know.
we could.
Are there any other really problematic mechanics in D&D apart from
I mean,
HP?
When I get to higher levels and I have teleportation spells and I don't think you're going to let me do them, that's going to be problematic.
Ooh, no, justify it all. Instantaneous fast light travel, yeah.
I mean, the bag of
Faster
holding,
than
I feel like is also there
That
are
can just
items.
not exist in the world though, like because we've got
Yeah,
our
but
own
I mean,
world,
like, sort
so,
of.
You mean
Yeah, which are kind of
fundamental
mechanically
mechanics?
problematic.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was too much silence. for
Held
a show.
advantage. You know how sometimes you can give out advantage to players, or like what's it called? There is a name for it
Holding
when.
your action?
Advantage.
No, like when you if a player
Inspiration.
plays
Inspiration.
inspiration, that's the one.
It's the little boost. You can do it, folks.
Because you were nice to that
No.
peasant man earlier.
Oh yeah, yeah, but you can feel good about yourself and then like have a bit more confidence. And I'm sure there must be some science in why being confident at things can make you better at them.
Yeah,
Even false
suppose.
confidence.
Yeah, I bet there is.
I haven't read any of it.
For a
I'm sure
future
there will be.
time, because I want to talk about the cold.
Let's talk about the cold.
Talk about the cold, Charlie.
Because my character was freezing. We'd all gone out in normal clothes we'd sort of travelled north towards the pole, I presume we're above the equator, on this little planet. We were like up in the foothills of the mountains. It started snowing. It was the middle of the night. We did not bring adequate gear. And what happened was, I think my character failed a con save and lost 2 HP. Is that what happened? This was quite a while ago
Yeah.
now.
Sounds right.
Quite a lot of your HP as well.
Which out of 8, yeah. Out of 8
Percentage-wise,
total. It was very bad. So there are two like quite separate D&D mechanics for cold, which actually that was neither of. But one of them is when you are exposed to cold, and it was sort of what happened is that in the rules you gain a point of exhaustion, and the other one is that in D&D there is cold damage. There is a thing called cold damage, which is usually doesn't come from being in the cold, but comes from someone casting like cone of cold at you, or as a white dragon, and it's just going, oh god, I'm taking cold damage, I'm freezing to death. But I found interesting sort of just theory from someone saying cold damage is kind of like instantaneous like cold burns. Like if you dropped like liquid nitrogen on yourself,
Ow.
it will burn you.
yeah.
And that is actually also very similar to basically what frostbite is, apart from frostbite kind of happens very slowly. But what you're doing, and frostbite, I mean, your skin gets, your body gets cold enough that ice crystals form inside you and
Eesh.
damage your cells and like little blood vessels, blocking off the blood vessels.
Well, they rip the cells apart from the inside, right? It's
If an ice crystal forms in the liquid inside your cell, yeah, it breaks it.
which is why
is
if
that
you
what
drop
happens?
flowers in liquid nitrogen, the room is suddenly filled with the smell of the flowers. Because the scent-producing chemicals are then just dispersed. They're like, "Yep, have all of it. Just have all of the chemicals." So if you shove flowers in, suddenly it smells really strongly of flowers.
Although if you freeze things fast enough, I thought it was, you can minimize the size of the crystals, right?
Yeah,
That's what they're trying to do with like freezing people.
Yeah.
because that's if you see that in
Speed.
geology, the longer a formation cools over, the larger the crystals are. So volcanic rocks that are ejected quickly have very small crystals.
Yeah, exactly. So
But it might
the
be
same
that
happens
if-
with ice cream, I think.
But if you have a flower, which is actually quite a large thing, then you drop it in liquid nitrogen.
not
It
be
freezes
fast
the
enough.
outside instantly, but it takes a little while for the
Yeah.
stuff on the inside to freeze, so the crystals be a bit bigger, maybe.
Yeah.
But
So
if you do it with a little slice of tissue, then it is insta-frozen.
theoretically, you could freeze things fast enough that you wouldn't rip the cells apart with ice crystals. But
So is that ripping apart thing what happens with cold burn?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's that it's cold enough that ice crystals form in the tissues and breaks the cells, and thus kills the cells. And the tissue is dying. and that's why when you have frostbite, eventually, if it's really bad, your toes turn black and then fall off.
Oh no.
Not good.
This is the issue with all those people who've cryogenically frozen themselves, isn't it? It's like, yeah, hey, well done, you did it. But unfortunately, as soon as you're unfrozen, you're dead. You're just dead.
They are dead.
It's happened to be frozen.
I don't think there's any way around it, unfortunately. Now, there might be a way in the future that we can cryogenically freeze people and bring them back, but the way we've done it so far, those people are dead now. And I
do you
don't.
want to know something really grim from my lab days?
Go on.
Did you freeze someone, Ali?
Pretty close. So, well, not me specifically, but there's a way of preparing tissue if you want to prepare brain tissue. And what you do is you want to get it as cold as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you stop it from whatever that word is, doing all its stuff. So what you do is you take this only works on animals. If you're going to work on animals, you take your animal, you open it up, so you anesthetize it, it's still alive, you open it up, and then this is going to get grim, so shout me out if there's go no further. All right, I'm going. You open it up, and then you put a needle into the heart. So you put this big old, like, sort of like an IV drip needle into the heart, and then you start perfusing ice cold saline, so salt solution, into the heart, and then that goes through the entire vasculature, the blood system, and all the way up into the brain, and it cools everything down so the blood comes out and the cold solution goes in, and then the thing is alive because it's oxygenated, right? So it can still live off this stuff. So it's alive until it's cooled until the point where it's dead, so essentially.
Is it like the opposite of the boiling a frog, like slowly boiling a frog? Is it the opposite of that?
It's not awake, right? It's alive but not awake. And then until the point where you cool it enough so that the heart is not really beating fast enough for it to be considered alive. And then you cut off its head and then it's definitely dead. And then the point being that, like, that's a good rule of thumb for death. But the point being that when you slice its brain, the brain comes sort of pre-refrigerated. So it takes less damage from the horrific slicing process.
Kind of ties in with the fact that it is much easier to cool in that case, but also warm yourself up by drinking something warm and getting the warmth inside you than it is trying to just warm yourself from the outside.
I thought you weren't meant to do that. I thought you were meant to.
Oh, really?
I thought when it's hot, you're meant to drink tea to cool yourself down.
Yes, I do. But yeah, when
it's not the same.
When it's cold, when it's cold,
that makes sense.
Drink.
You can drink.
Drink.
I mean,
I
do.
Water, yeah.
It would. Nothing would stop me drinking tea, but
it's kind of like if you're in a survival situation, and you can make a fire, like heat up and like try and sip warm water because you'll warm up a lot quicker if you can.
This is useful information.
I've got all these survival
tips. What other tips do you have?
Well, I was going to ask you, right? So so forgetting frostbite for a while. The other thing is like just being really cold, hypothermia, that kind of thing. So we were kind of like, let's say, we were in a survival situation. We were like locked outside. We had no shelter. We had no fire. What do you think are some of the things that our characters should have done if we'd had to spend longer there, or to try and like?
I can technically light a campfire.
Oh, great!
So that would have been a good thing to do.
I like that, yeah.
But obviously at the time we were trying to be stealthy and hide, so we didn't want to do that.
If you did create a campfire or set me on fire, Uriel would be warm for the rest of his life.
Technically true.
The best kind of true.
Were you saying cuddles, Ali?
A cuddle puddle, yeah.
Cuddle puddle. It made me really sad when we were talking about that in game, that actually Infinity would just be cold and like probably not very nice to cuddle. And I was like, oh no, poor Infinity.
And if potentially, like, depending on the kind of metal, could just be very bad for taking the heat away, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing is doing exercise, right? Because the physical using the energy in your muscles does generate heat.
So when you start getting cold, you start shivering, and that is your body saying, I need heat right now more than I need like the energy that I'm using up. Which is why it's also really important to eat and have food and have like simple sugars in order to get enough energy. And shivering, if you start shivering uncontrollably, you should be able to physically be able to stop yourself. So if you start shivering uncontrollably, that's getting bad. If someone stops shivering, it is very bad.
That sounds that's like a horror thing, isn't it? Like, it's bad that this is happening.
It means they're suffering
stops.
from from like, you know, more than just like mild hypothermia. Like they are going to be very ill. And hypothermia also just like muddles your brain. So it's very hard if it's happening to you to be able to like notice, and then it kind of stops your ability to, you know, light a fire and do all those other things.
Question. I have heard, I don't know if this is true, people get really hot eventually when they get hypothermia. Is that
paradoxical
right?
undressing?
Yes, yeah, you take all of your clothes off.
And then they start stripping.
So I
did it. My God. I'm having a real night today. Like,
I don't know if it I don't think it's like every time you will take all your clothes off, but although there is one situation in which you should get naked if it's very cold. Just to bring that up.
To go into a finished situation.
It is if you're wet, if you've fallen in water, no, that wasn't. Oh, I meant. If you find yourself in a cold survival situation, I'm just talking to the audience. You guys carry on. And you fall in water or are covered in water, often known as being wet, then you should take all your clothes off, because you lose heat much, much faster when your clothes are wet than when you're dry. So
I too like to take my clothes off when I'm wet.
Sorry, we need to get a bonk emote. We really need a bonk emote. For God's sakes.
I didn't even anticipate this when I was prepping this. Should have known.
Sorry.
Which is also why, if you're doing your exercises, right, you're freezing to death, you're like, right, I need to do exercise, I need to warm myself up. You've got to be careful, because if you do too much exercise and you actually get warm, you will start sweating, and then you will just, I mean, has everyone done that? You know, when you hike up a mountain and you're all sweaty and warm, and then you sit at the top and then you're like, I'm freezing.
Yeah.
On top of this mountain.
Yes, I get that. Sorry, I'm still.
Are you not a regular mountaineer, or right, you're still processing?
I'm trying.
The thing to bear in mind is, if it's freezing cold and you're also wet, make sure you put something on your head. That's the other thing. Because you lose. There was a study, I remember, that you lost if you were otherwise clothed, you lost 40% of all of your heat from transfer from your head. Which is why at Scouts they were always like, make sure you've got a hat on, because you'll lose 40%.
Cover your ears as well.
Is that just true for everyone, or is like the amount of hair you have?
Yeah, but Uriel is getting very cold very quickly.
If having a hat on helps, does hair help?
I don't know what the thermal properties of hair is.
Maybe it depends on how much.
My head gets really hot in the sun.
Yeah.
That sounds good enough to me. Yeah. Does the kind of hat like matter as well? Like,
could it be a helmet?
All have equal insulating properties?
Do all hats have equal insulating properties? Is that the question?
I feel like that's a question which could quite easily be answered.
No, it's a headline.
Yes,
and the answer's
always no.
As we traipse up the mountain, and thank God we got these sombreros with us. They provide just as much heat conserving properties as thermals.
So, my top tip: get your hat, not your sombrero necessarily. Eat a bunch of food. Try and find shelter. If you happen to have like a lightsaber and a tauntaun that recently died, maybe just
helps if you've lost your sense of smell.
Or your friends.
If Luke had long COVID, it would have been a much more pleasant experience.
Oh, get out of the wind! Freaking wind chill, man.
Yeah,
wind chill, and for hypothermia, wind chill is huge. It's just because of the conduction. It's just because if there's no wind, like there's less conduction. You are heating up the air around you, and the air around you isn't.
So you have a little blanket of hot air around you all the time.
Yeah, you call it a boundary layer in fluid dynamics.
Yeah.
Tell me of this boundary layer.
That's why we have hair. The hair is there to trap a very thin layer of air around you. It's the same principle why fans work and why fans cool you down. Because if you're moving the air past you, you're stripping the warmer layer of air that surrounds you away, and then replacing it with colder air that you then rapidly heat up, but you feel it as colder air at first.
Does that mean hairier people are hotter?
In this sense,
Yeah.
yes.
Shamini did it that time.
Sorry.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking
I
about.
It would
could do
explain
the
why,
jokes
but it also
too.
explains why animals like bears have, like thick fur. Like it's exactly the same principle.
Insulating layers. Where obviously, like if you're going to be in a cold survival situation, having already bought like a nice big like jacket and everything would be the ideal, or just like not.
And then grow loads of
being in the
hair.
middle of nowhere. And then get hair. But if you've got the jackets, you don't need the hair. That's what I'm saying. You can be prepped. Don't drink alcohol. Alcohol messes up your like body's ability to thermoregulate sensibly.
Don't like this anymore.
Yeah, because there's
I was enjoying your tips.
Just when you're gonna freeze to death, mates. It's just the one
it'll be
time.
But there is
Oh,
the
no,
story, isn't there,
mates.
about I think it's the chef on the Titanic. He survived because he just necked like bottle after bottle of brandy. He, I think, had massive frostbite because he couldn't regulate the temperature in his extremities, but he felt warm.
So how does that help?
And
Well,
he
he
survived.
he
Warm
lived.
help. Hmm.
But there's something about shock as well, isn't there? Because like you can be all right, and then you can get shock, and then that can. I mean, that shock will trigger you to go very cold, and like blood flow to be shut off to your extremities, which has nothing to do with temperature, right? But it's like you can trigger the same sorts of systems through psychological stress. Whereas if you're a chef and you've just necked like all of your cooking brandy, you're presumably pretty, upbeat about the whole situation.
If I was on the Titanic, I would want to be drunk.
If you're going to die, you're going to die happy.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
Would you say necking
fun
that many bottles of
brandy.
brandy would make you happy? I think that many bottles of brandy would turn me into crying drunk, Emily.
Oh
But imagine
no!
if you like
Not
had
dying
accepted
and
that you were going to
crying.
die, you'd be like, yeah, isn't life beautiful? With all these empty bottles of brandy floating
Or
around
you'd
you.
be
and,
crying.
Yeah.
people
Like-
dying.
But it's
around.
also it's true to life. If anybody's played Skyrim or Morrowind, what do you do when you go into like an encounter? You neck every potion that you have. All he was doing was following the Elder Scrolls method of. He also presumably ate like 8 wheels of cheese and lots of uncooked vegetables. He was the
It's
chef.
a medical marvel.
Let's do the science of how that works in Skyrim.
No, oh god, but also the carrying weight, like. Well,
Oh, yeah.
Somebody did I remember this. Somebody did the analysis on Steve, like your Minecraft character. How strong are you? Because it's like you have the grid of what you can carry with you, right? And you can have 64 blocks of something in each slot. So somebody worked out that the densest thing in the game was gold. And if you filled every single slot in your inventory with 64 blocks of gold, and you're walking around completely unimpeded, it's the weight of the Eiffel Tower just in your pocket.
Wow.
Like
Go
it's
Steve.
wildly unrealistic.
There's
Can
one
we
more.
pause because there's a raid happening and say
Oh,
hi?
Yes, we'll have
is that what we have to, what's that we
We'll
have to
delete
do?
it from.
we'll delete this from the podcast. But hello, Froodles Doodles. Thank you very much for the raid. You join us for
Hello.
discussing the biology of frost damage and just generally cold damage, I suppose, in D&D. We are probably relatively close, I suppose, towards the end of the discussion, but we've just broken out of this. We don't normally interact with chat much.
This is because you're special.
You're special.
Very special. Thank you very much for the
He's
raid.
special.
But I guess the question was, right, for you, your character, Shamini, being outside in this sort of deep snow mountain kind of arena, and you took 2 points of damage, right? Which in
Yeah.
theory is 25% of your total HP.
Bad.
So how did that damage, would that damage have manifested?
For hypothermia. Let me just read my notes on the symptoms of hypothermia. It's not good. It's not good. So start off.
Don't your limbs drop off and stuff?
But this all comes
That'd be
down to what we're
frostbite.
calling HP, though.
Hypothermia is lowering of core body temperature. So it's your body temperature goes down, and then your organs start shutting down. Like
So there's 2 different ways that things can go wrong. Either you can like shut the whole body down, very bad, or you can just freeze a bit off and then it sort of snaps off.
sacrifice
less
the
bad.
limbs. Yeah, but it's usually both, isn't it? If you're exposed and out there.
I'm not sure how it works in terms of, because for frostbite, sometimes it's permanent loss of fingers or toes or what have
If
you.
you can't save them, yeah.
But I don't like what is the
Or
threshold?
Noses sometimes.
What is the threshold at which it is irrecoverable? Because you hear stories all the time of people getting frostbite, but it eventually return. They get function back.
Is it just
Like the
regeneration?
regenerative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because we've not talked about that at all. Not even when we were talking about like healing and stuff like that. The regenerative potential of like biological tissue, because some things, you know, they can do whole legs, right? That's the lizard from Spider-Man.
And if we're talking like tips of fingers and extremities, I don't know the numbers, but I think they have a higher turnover rate anyway than like other cells in your body.
Oh, really?
So I think so. Your fingernails definitely go quick, obviously, because they grow. But because what is it? Every 7 years, you're a completely new person.
Oh yeah.
Oh, ship of Theseus o'clock.
Yeah.
But like, but also on the other, like, because if you restrict blood flow to an area for a certain amount of time, it can be fatal to restore it, right? Because that's what happened in 127 hours. Like, even if they discovered him and lifted the rock off, it probably would have killed him.
It's the same. It's the same for frostbite. Like, the rewarming has to be done quite carefully, and there's extra damage that's caused when you like start recovering again. So there's the initial damage, and then like as the blood flow starts back in again, it causes further damage. Although I'm not sure there's anything you can necessarily do about that.
Yeah, because when I used to do cross country at my school, it was always in winter, and our PE kit was this ludicrous, like, short shorts and then like a what's it called, like a vest. And so you were like, right, go out and run, 5 kilometers. And they used to say to you when you came back, like, right, I know it's tempting, but don't put your hands on the radiator, because like you've lost all sensation in the hand, but it will do you more damage if you actually just put them on the radiator. I assume for that reason.
Or is it because you've actually deadened some of the nerve endings in your hands, so you just leave your hand on the radiator for ages, and you're like,
you're like,
okay,
oh
now,
no, it's on palm.
Yeah.
But also, I just Googled something. I'm sorry, I broke the rule, but
you're not allowed to Google, Ali.
You're not an expert.
I
lied. I didn't Google it at all. I Googled it in my mind. I mind Googled this. That there are things called cold shock proteins, which are triggered by cold shocks. And then they do well from this brief excursion into my mind Google. I would tell you that they bind RNA and DNA, and that's all I'm going to tell you. But yeah, I mean, they clearly
that's homework. Everyone, read about cold shock proteins.
I don't know if they're protective or not, but they exist. So,
do you all have time for one more deeply disturbing and
always
horrifying story? Tangentially related to being cold.
Absolutely.
Content warning for everyone. It's not good. It's gruesome. This is tangentially related in that it's about some people several of whom froze to death. But I made a film on it for work a few months ago, and out of all the films I've made, it's one of the ones that really stuck with me, and it was about the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass in Russia. Which
I too have worked on a documentary on this, but I worked on a documentary on this years ago. We'll just say years ago, when I was just starting out in telly, and it was like a docudrama looking at like all these like weird mysteries that came out from behind the Iron Curtain when it fell, and it like there were a lot of things like, was it a Yeti, and like things like that. So but I think they definitely talked about
Discovery.
Was this an American show?
Animal Planet and Nat Geo. And I'm in some of the episodes because I was on work experience and they needed an extra person to run around being scared of things.
To play the Yeti.
Yeah. It is the kind of story and mystery that they've made like films inspired by it, and there's quite a lot of like spooky YouTube series going what happened that night, but it is a still unsolved and very, very creepy mystery. So 1959, Soviet Russia, a group of young students, sort of early 20s, who were all very like outdoorsy type people, decided to go on a cross-country sort of hike / skiing / camping trip across the Ural Mountains. So off they went with skis and tents and cameras and diaries, and then they never arrived at the other end. And people eventually started to get a bit worried that they hadn't turned up. This is like a massive long trek through sort of complete wilderness. And they sent out search parties. And the search party eventually found Well, the first thing they found was the remains of their tent. Someone spotted a tent pole sticking up out of the snow. The tent had been cut open from the inside. When they looked in, their boots were still there, most of them, all their belongings were there, and there was absolutely no sign of them at all. And they eventually then searched around that area. They found another 2 of them, I think, further down this slope by a tree line where there were the remains of a fire. And they'd, I think, died of hypothermia in the end. They found another 3 of them who had, it looked like they were basically at different places coming like back up the slope towards the tent. Like they had, like decided to try and get back to it and sort of basically died where they were in the snow at different times. And then some months later, they eventually found the others. They found, and this is another survival tip, they had created a key thing about when it's really cold is you want to get off the ground because you lose a lot of heat through the ground. So they found this a sort of like sort of platform where they put loads of branches down and put clothes on it. And that's sort of kind of thing, one of the things that you're supposed to do in order to not be in contact with the ground. And nearby they found the final 3 bodies. Some of those bodies were missing their eyeballs. One of them was missing a tongue. And not all of these people died from hypothermia. Some of them died from what looked like a really strong impact. So, they had, one of them had a crushed skull. A couple of them had broken ribs. There wasn't really like marks on the outside, like if someone had sort of punched them. It looked a bit more like if you're in a car crash and you have like the impact that breaks things. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that because this was in Soviet Russia, people didn't talk about it much, wasn't publicized much, and everything that the government sort of said, no one believes anything that the Russian government says, basically, because they did another public sort of inquiry on it a few years ago, and sort of everyone was like, yeah, no, but we don't believe you. So there is so many sort of conspiracy theories, like it was a Yeti, it was secret government testing,
aliens,
like it was probably aliens.
I didn't think I ever heard the aliens one.
They'd stumbled across like a secret weapon, and then the military had like murdered them, and there was something like, there's radiation on their clothing, and like that means they were exposed to, I don't know, maybe it was like nuclear testing or something.
Yes, I remember the radiation now you said it. Yeah.
I suppose, but with the stuff that was non-hypothermia, there's no way of knowing if that happened before or after death, right?
Yeah, because I think one of the like, if you're trying to sensibly explain it as well as you possibly can try, is that it was hypothermia, but some of them fell and got attacked by an animal before they actually died of the hypothermia. So, but it's still weird. I still think it's weird that they cut out of the tent. That's why.
Yes. So the coroner said that some of them had died of those injuries and not of hypothermia, which doesn't.
Yeah, but I think one of the like sensible explanations was an animal attacked them while they were running from something.
The reason I made a film about this is a recent paper, which was looking into one of the theories in particular, which was that while they were sleeping in the middle of the night, an avalanche fell on them, basically. And this has been a theory for a while, but there's lots of reasons to dismiss it. Like they knew what they were doing, and they would not have pitched a tent somewhere where there was going to be an avalanche. You want a less than 30-degree slope. And when they went there to the place where the tent was pitched, they didn't see any of these signs of like snow everywhere, like big sort of sign of the snow having moved. It looked like a gentle slope. So these researchers basically, have we lost Ali?
No, I think he's just deep in thought.
Oh no.
Oh,
I'm so deep in so much thought.
He's communicating telepathically. Oh no, he's doing it normally again.
Oh, did it really?
So they looked into, could it have been a avalanche, and they were looking into basically a particular kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche, which is basically you've got all this packed snow, and then you've got a weak layer underneath where the snow doesn't stick together. So it's essentially like the whole thing is on ball bearings, and you could get a sort of chunk of packed snow that could slide down and land on you. They were also sleeping. All their skis were under the tent, so it's like a hard surface. And these researchers basically looked at like car crash data that people had done decades ago about car crashes against different kinds of materials, and the injuries seemed to match basically a huge heavy weight landing on you if you were lying flat on a really hard surface, and it could, you know, break the ribs, break the skull. And the idea is that the slope, although the surface of the slope was less than 30 degrees, like underneath there was a slight hump, which meant that actually at that point it was slightly closer. Winds during the night could have pushed more snow onto that, suddenly sort of tipping the scales. They would have suddenly woken up being like crushed and injured in the night, not knowing what was happening. And I mean, what were their thought processes at that point? Because they all made their way down to the tree line to try to lit a fire, and it didn't work. And once they'd left the tent in the middle of the night in those freezing temperatures,
you can't go back.
That's great.
That makes a lot of sense. Apart from the crushed skull somehow still made it out of the tent.
Yeah.
How?
Could have carried it with them. Maybe.
I have a feeling the footprints.
This feels like the Joe Rogan podcast again. We're talking about conspiracy. It's entirely possible.
There's a lot of data that suggests that they were already dead while they were walking out of the tent. What do you think about that?
They're actually zombies.
Possible.
They were attacked by a gorilla. Do you think you could take a gorilla in a fight?
I heard they didn't actually die.
You know what? I know a guy who does that. He does it on every Friday. I can introduce you to him. Yeah. Oh, it's the gorilla's here.
End of Joe Rogan.
Yeah. So what you're saying is this was the potential, like, one, if we'd stayed up there for the stakeout, we could have ended up with our own Dyatlov Pass incident.
Well,
we found a robot and 2 humans just there frozen.
They knew all the survival, you know, lighting a fire, making a shelter.
You guys know nothing.
But that was extreme conditions. We had some light snow, but I don't know. Yeah, but we know nothing. I feel like we could have quite possibly,
But what we do know about, as we've established in the course of this episode, is that leveling up in D&D does make some kind of sense.
Yeah.
It makes more sense than we thought it did.
You can get better at things. And sometimes when you sleep, you get much better at things when you wake up.
It doesn't have to be the thing that you necessarily practiced.
Yeah.
And we, you know, there is the science of, you know, doing cold damage, and I feel like you can get hurt by being too cold. That is
definitely.
Also, points of exhaustion, you could sort of map them onto hypothermia. You get
points of exhaustion
when you get cold, you get points of exhaustion, and then you get bad at doing stuff, which kind of matches. Like, you're bad at doing stuff once you start getting sort of like lethargic.
I don't know if being cold makes you exhausted. I'm just not sure that sort of.
It's a point of exhaustion though, so it's not necessarily.
One point of exhaustion means that you'll have disadvantage on all ability checks.
Yeah.
And the second one means
you're so cold,
halved, and the third one means you have disadvantage on attack rolls. So it's
that sort of muddles your mind, I suppose. But
it's I like the sort of mind muddling, like getting a bit slow, not being able to maybe physically do things. It doesn't quite map, but I feel like if this happens again, we could make it much more accurate. We could all do the symptoms of hypothermia.
Well, that's the important thing, is that it's kind of like it's a feedback loop, right? Because like we talk about stuff that happens in the campaign, and then the stuff we talk about here informs how Ali does the campaign. Because we have very limited power. We're like you know, Gandalf in Court of Theoden. So basically,
we are Gandalf still.
We did have the power here, so it was actually ironic that they said you have the power here. So actually, we do have the power as players because we are creating the story.
Just indirectly.
It's a beautiful metaphor for D&D.
So that's probably a good point to wrap up the show. We're going to be back next week with the actual kind of adventure. We have just advanced the plot in the previous session, so there's lots of stuff to talk about in the next episode.
We found stuff out.
Oh my god, we did find so much stuff.
MacGuffins galore.
And we leveled up, so there's exciting
Things?
stuff for next week. If you'd like to catch up on the adventure, then it's all available on wherever you get your podcasts. It's on YouTube. It's available. Will be streamed here on Twitch live. But if you'd like to watch the video on demand, then definitely go over to the RPGeeks YouTube channel.
The podcast is an episode behind because I had annoying people staying in my house this weekend, so I didn't get around to doing it.
Oh.
It wasn't. They were annoying. They were lovely. They were these people. They were
Stabbed through the boob hole. How dare you?
Look at it tying all the things together.
Yeah, callbacks.
Well, shall we say goodbye and then we will end the video and the podcast. Thank you.
I think we should.
Very much for listening / watching, however you choose to consume us. That sounded strange. That's Vor.
Yeah.
God, I got everybody else to facepalm at least once during this video. That's good. So, thank you for watching. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from all the RP geeks. If you want to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. See you next time.
Bye.